West Virginia mountain melody. There's a new river singing to me. Oh, this time it's wild and free. Your West Virginia mountain melodies.
It's a great day at the Clarksburg History Museum as I am honored to have as our guest today Rosalyn Queen. Rosalyn is a gifted author and historian of the rich Italian heritage here in Clarksburg. She's so active in the community, and I just want to welcome you, Rosalyn. Thank you so much for coming today.
You're most welcome. It's my pleasure.
I have to share a personal story with you. My mother passed away here recently, and I'm going through all of her recipes. And I can't tell you how many little clippings that she had out of the Clarksburg paper from your Grapevine of your recipes. And now they have gone into my cookbooks.
Oh, that makes me feel good.
You still do the columns?
Yeah, I do the column. I still do the Grapevine every week, and it appears in the newspaper in the print, and then Connect Bridgeport carries the Grapevine if you go online.
Oh, okay.
And I just talked with Jeff Taquina, is the editor for the Connect Bridgeport,
Yeah.
and I just talked to him. He said, "Are you getting?" I said, "Yeah, I'm working on a Thanksgiving thing." So it's some of them are repetitious, but maybe what I wrote last year for Thanksgiving, this year it means something different to people,
Yeah.
So that's what I need. And I've been writing the Grapevine for over 35 years.
I knew it was a long time. Yes. Because a lot of those clippings were pretty back in the 80s, maybe.
Back in the 80s, that's right.
Wonderful. But not only that, it was not the recipes with your little stories that went with it.
Every Italian dish has a story.
But first, I know you did a cookbook, which we're going to talk about, Arrivederci, Recipes and Customs Every Italian Girl Takes from Home. I just love this. But in that cookbook, you wrote something I thought was very touching. You said, to learn about our origins is one of the most important legacies that we can give our children and generations to follow. If we are to let these slip by, we might well lose our identity. And I love that. So what I want to talk about first is about your heritage, a little bit about where you grew up and who your parents were and some of your memories of growing up in the Clarksburg area.
Well, my father was an immigrant, and his story is, I just have to share this because this is something almost unbelievable. My grandmother married Giovanni Oliverio in Italy. And they had my father, who was Biagio Oliverio. And his father came here to get a job, came to America to get a job, and he was going to send for my grandmother and my dad. Well, he was killed in the Monongah mine explosion, which left my father and my grandmother fatherless and husbandless in San Giovanni, Italy. And she, in the meantime, remarried. She married Luigi Bernetti, and they had a daughter. He came over here, got a job in the mines, but thank goodness he sent money for Dad and my aunt and my grandmother to come over here. And when they came through Ellis Island, my grandmother said my father's name was Burnett instead of Oliverio, because she was afraid if he had a different name than hers, that they wouldn't let him in. They'd send him back. So she said he was Biagio or Bill Burnett instead of Oliverio. So our whole life, we thought we were Burnetts. So several years ago, I was granted a grant to interview 50 Italian families in West Virginia. And so as I was working on this, a couple ladies from Nutter Fort or Stonewood in that area said to me, "Rosalyn, do you know, you act like an Oliverio?" And I said, "Okay, And so then the other lady said to me, said, "You really remind me of the Oliverios." And I said, she said, "Well, you were an Oliverio." And I said, "No, how would I be an Oliverio?" So she went on to tell me the story of what had happened.
And you never knew this?
I never knew that. And my father had passed by that time, and he'd never shared that with us. Never. And so anyway, I Thought, well, Rosalyn, start searching. So Merle Moore at the time, who was the librarian here, was my very, very good friend, and she just loved Italian history and genealogy and all that. So she helped me, and we contacted Beckley, where there is a mine library in Beckley, and we said, "Do you have any information on the Monongah mine explosion?" And they said, "Yes, we do." I said, "Well, can you tell me if there was an Oliverio that was killed?" And they said, "Yes, there was an Oliverio. Giovanni Oliverio was killed in the explosion. Do you have any information on him?" He said, "Well, we have here the mining company, the people that owned the mine, sent checks to the survivors. And we have here that they sent a check for $224 to his widow, who was Jenny, that was my grandmother, Jenny Oliverio, and to his son, Bill Oliverio, a check for $180 or something like that. That was insurance benefit or something." So I said, "Well, Rosalyn, this is true. Let's face the facts." So I started down at Monongah and researched, and I can't find, I went to Italy and found the house where my father was born, and there are still Oliverios living in it, but they couldn't tell me. I can't find what Oliverios were related to. I have researched and researched, and I thought surely my grandfather that was killed had sisters or brothers, but I can't find any. So anyway, but we found that where my grandfather's grave was in Monongah, and my two sisters and my brother and I bought a stone, and all of our family went down, and we marked my grandfather's grave with the stone. Oh. And so that was a part of us, So I really am not a Burnett. I'm an Oliverio.
What a story!
Isn't that unbelievable that you go that time? But my father was one who, like I said, he was born in Italy. He and my grandmother and my aunt came to America, and he worked in the mines, and he told the stories of when they tried to unionize, that the mine company put them out and they lived in tents. And he, how hard it was and all that.
Now, what year would that have been?
That probably would have been in the early 30s, 1930, somewhere around there. It probably would have been. But I'd like to tell the story about my dad because, I just did research the last couple of weeks with Veterans Day. One of the proudest things my father ever talked about was being serving America. He came over here and he thought that's what he wanted to do. He was so proud that he was an American citizen at that point, and he wanted to be in the service. And so my dad was a proud little Italian. I mean, through my whole life, I see things popping up in me that came from Daddy, But he joined the service, and he joined the Marines. And he was born
World War II?
No, let me tell you. And he was born in 1905. He wanted to be in the service so badly that he lied about his age. He said he was 17, and he said he was 18, but he was only 17. So they took him, he went to the Marines because he heard the Marines were the few and the proud. They were the best service organization we had in America. So Dad was a Marine. And they sent him to Nicaragua. That's where he's served. And that would have been about 1922, 1923 when he went to. I thought, well, what in the world was going on? So I did some more research last week for Veterans Day, and I found out that Nicaragua the Spanish was trying to take it over. They were actually fighting wars there. They wanted it to belong to them. And America realized, of course, we didn't have the Panama Canal at that point, but our ships would go down to Nicaragua, unload, and there was a train that would take them over to the Pacific coast, and there was a boat over there that would get them and bring them up to the western United States. And so that if they lost that access, if America lost that access, they would be losing a lot,
Yeah.
So anyway, that's what Dad did. He went down there and helped defend, and nobody knew. I mean, I didn't even know what Nicaragua was, although in my travels, I did finally get to go down to Nicaragua. Very poor country, you know. But so Dad had all these experiences. But getting back to, we grew up, Italians are very clannish. I don't know if you ever put that, you know, they feel safe, I guess. If there's numbers, they feel safe in numbers. So we settled, my mother and dad, when they married, they settled in Eastview section of Clarksburg. And my sister Joanne and I were born there. And the house is still there where we were born in. And we were born at home. And my grandmother, of course, every man took care of their mother back then. You know, that was unspoken words. I mean, that's what you did. So Daddy, my grandmother, her husband then died young. And so that left her with my dad. And so she lived with us her whole life. She lived to be 99 years old. And she lived in our house with us.
Oh, Rosalyn, how special to have her with you.
It was.
Growing up.
But the part was, she never learned English. And we would say, Grandma, talk English. No, I'm Italian. Well, my dad wouldn't talk Italian because he was American, you know. So we had this thing going on all the time. But we picked up. I mean, you know, she could make me understand whether she was hot or cold or whether she wanted water or, you know, if she was mad at me, I knew that. But anyway, and she taught us, and she was a very religious lady. And so she taught us a lot of customs from the church and a lot of Italian customs because she lived with us. But my dad built our home where we went for the house we were born in. Then he built another house, which my sister lives in. We still have the house. And we lived there our whole life. And in our neighborhood were the Oliverios, the Iquintas, the Mancusos, Muratos, and the Gussies. That was our little clan. And so I can remember 2 or 3 nights a week, my mother would get me and my sister dressed up. Daddy worked shifts at that point. He went to work at the Rolling Glass Company. And and so in the evenings, when Dad was on an evening shift, Mother would get us cleaned up. And we would walk, there was a railroad track, and we would walk down the track to go visit the Muratos or the Mancusos or the Maisies. There was Maisies there too. And it was a fun way. I mean, you know, and we were very well-behaved children. I mean, you know.
Where did you go to school?
I went to grade school at Eastview. I went from 1st to the 6th at Eastview Grade School. Then I went to Broadway Junior High from 7 to 9. And then I went to RW, graduated from RW.
Fellow Prexy.
Yeah, that's right. Go Prexies.
Who were some of your teachers at RW you remember?
I remember the teacher who had the most influence on my life was Jane Maxwell. Did you have Jane?
Yes, I did have
Jane
her.
Maxwell Rogers then. I think she married him.
Had her English.
English. She taught me French for 3 years. I took
French. I had her in French.
Yeah. Uh-huh. And she was sponsor of the yearbook, and I was her editor. And one of the best compliments I loved doing that. That's why I like writing articles, and you know.
And she inspired you.
Exactly. And she had me writing. I even found a book where she'd have me write little stories, and she'd go through and she'd, now you changed the gender here, and you didn't do this or you didn't do that. Things she did, and I learned she was helping me. I didn't consider it anything, but she was helping me do that, right. You know. But not long, her daughter, she died, and her son died, and her daughter is still living. And I happened to go to a library dinner last year, and I sat at a table, and here I was sitting with her daughter. I had never really met her daughter, although I loved Jane, but I'd never met her daughter. And her daughter said to me, "Are you Rosalyn Burnett?" And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "You know, I can remember my mom saying, when Rosalyn Burnett does the yearbook, I don't even have to check it. I know it's done right. And
what a compliment.
it was, isn't that so? You just, and to come back to me at that point, and I know her daughter must have told her that, you know. So anyway, we grew up in Eastview, and there were a lot of Italian families, although there were other families in the neighborhood, but we were real clannish, you know. I can remember when at one point my husband and I built our home in Eastview. I lived in Eastview for 62 years. And I did not leave Eastview till I was 62 years old. But I can remember my husband and I, we just moved in our home, which I'm back in right now. And we moved in the 1st of December. And on December 8th, I had twins, which I didn't know I was having. And at that time, I stayed in the hospital 2 weeks, and I got to come home and bring one kid, but the other one had to stay in the hospital. He was still premature. And when the second boy came home, here one afternoon, knocking on my door, and here was all these little Italian women with their hairs and their babushka and their little dresses and their aprons on, you know, bags in their arms. I said, come in. They brought food for me and the babies. I can remember there was big cans of peaches. I don't know what else was in there, but I can remember peach halves.
Everyone looked out after everyone else.
Each other, that's right.
Don't you wish it was still like that?
Yes,
today?
I do. And sometimes I do that, and I think I offend people. You know, if I know somebody's sick, I'll make a pot of chicken pastina, and I'll go to the door. And, you know, you don't go anywhere without first calling somebody and making an appointment, you know, nowadays. And I think what has happened, you know, why that's like that is back then, of course, I went to work, not until my children was in the first grade, and then I went to work. But now it takes two parents to work to get along. And so they don't have that liberty that we had of being at home, and you know, there's not like homeroom mothers, and
or like you say, having elderly parents living in with you, the whole family together like that. Eastview, tell me a little bit about Eastview. Were there different stores in Eastview when you were growing up?
There were 3 grocery stores in Eastview. That's all, just grocery stores.
Okay.
And it was the Guzzies, and then it was another gentleman. It was American. I don't know his name. And then the Oliverios had a store, the Superette, and it was, and all of our kids grew up working there, you know, and they learned all their business sense from Sam Oliverio because he owned it, and my boys were this big, and they started burning trash down there, and they were so happy when they come home with $1, you know. So, but yeah, there were stores, and at Guzzi's store and Oliverio's store, we could get all of our wonderful Italian dishes. You know, we could get all of the salamis and the black olives and the green olives, you know, and the homemade sausage there. Once a week, we knew what day it was. They made the homemade sausage. And here's another thing. Mrs. Oliverio, and I called her Aunt Daisy. I don't think we were related, but they were our aunts. That was respectful. That's what we did. You know, we called Aunt Daisy and Uncle Tony. Well, Aunt Daisy had an outdoor oven. She baked bread. And she baked bread every Tuesday.
Oh, I bet that was good.
And you could smell it all over the neighborhood.
So these were like they call them like a beehive oven? Like they were sort of...
Well, they were like this. They were round like this, about twice the size of this desk. And a top it was like cement and bricks and there was bricks on the hearth. The hearth was made out of bricks, and that's what made the bread so nice and crusty.
And she had like a long paddle or something.
That's exactly right. She'd put the bread in, and then when it was done, she'd take it out. And we could smell it all over, you know. Well, that's how we got our bread. I mean, we paid 10 cents, and Mommy would give us 15 or 20 cents to go down and get 2 loaves of bread till the next time she made it. And then if she ever had any little ones left, and at the time we didn't make pepperoni rolls because pepperoni was expensive, you know. And but eventually as we got older and a little bit more money, Aunt Daisy would roll some pepperoni rolls and give them to us kids when they were done, the pepperoni rolls. But I had the pleasure of smelling that bread and seeing it made in that oven.
That's like a lost art, isn't it?
Exactly. It is a lost art. Yeah, and people just don't do that anymore.
So walking in Clarksburg, I've asked this to almost everyone I've interviewed here. What were some of the stores that you would go to in Clarksburg that you remember?
Oh, of course, I was a clothes horse.
Oh, yes. Mr. Rosen's Clothes Horse. Yes. And I worked in there for a while.
Where?
At Clothes Horse.
Oh.
On 4th Street.
Yes. And Friedlander's, Broda's. I loved that store. And they were expensive. But to me, I would rather buy one good dress there than, And so when I was in high school, I was a senior, and the manager at the cable company came over to RW and told Mr. Bald, was my principal, and told Mr. Bald, said, I need a girl to work in the cable company from 4 to 7, 3 hours I worked. I went straight after school and worked, And so Mr. Bald called me down. He said, Rosalyn, I think this is something. He said, would you not? Well, I also had a scholarship. I had a home ec scholarship to West Virginia University. And I was thinking very seriously because I loved home ec. Mrs. Sellers was my home ec teacher. Did you?
I never had her, but I've heard my parents talk of her.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, she was my home ec teacher. And I belonged to FHA, Future Homemakers of America. And I won a big award, the Betty Crocker Award of the Year, because I loved to sew. I sewed everything I wore if I could get the material, But so I went to work at a cable company. And that money I made stymied my plans to go to college. I just thought, I like this money. Mm-hmm. And then it wasn't very long after that I met my husband. So, but when I graduated from high school, they offered me a full-time job. So I went to work at the cable company.
Where were they located at
They were located at the end of 3rd Street, down there now where the new annex of the courthouse is.
Yes.
Okay, it was right there on that
right.
corner.
Down from the Bluebird store.
That's right.
Yes,
yeah,
I remember that.
That's exactly right. And as far as food, I did buy a lot of food at the Bluebird. I did a lot of shopping at the Working Man's store.
Remember,
especially when I had 2 little boys, I could find
get your blue jeans.
That's there. I did a lot of shopping at the Bluebird, and I remember, I miss so much the Murphys. And going in there and buying a hot dog and a Coke at lunchtime, so I enjoy, but there's nothing like that anymore.
The 3 top things for me that I remember of Clarksburg, the stores, especially the stores at Christmas, but not only the stores, the people that worked in there. You knew these people because a lot of them worked in there 30 or 40 years.
Forever.
They knew your family, you knew their family. And that's the second thing I remember and miss about Clarksburg. But the third one is the food.
No.
I mean, anything you wanted was here.
That's right. Let me insert just a little food memory I have. I told you about my Aunt Daisy making the bread there. Well, she had 2 daughters, Rosie and Bay. And her 2 daughters married 2 brothers. And the 2 brothers happened to be the Menard boys.
Oh, okay.
So the 2 sisters married the 2 brothers. And the 2 sisters, of course, went with Joe and Sam over to Menard's. And that was one of the first Italian restaurants in our area. And they cooked out of their kitchen. And if you look there, you'll see how close they are to the railroad. So, they probably charged 15 cents a plate for spaghetti and meatballs. And that's how they got through the war, was cooking there. That was the original, that's how it originated, Menards.
In the same location
in the very same location, that's correct. They've added and remodeled and done things like that, But that was one of the first Italian restaurants here, I can remember as a young girl dating on Saturday nights, we would go to the Wonder Bar. Now, they had Folio owned it,
Folios.
yeah, and they had Italian, but they didn't do like Menards. Menards was Italian. Everything was Italian at Menards. Now, the Wonder Bar wasn't. I mean, get
Steaks
a steak
and-
anywhere. Yeah, that type of thing. But they did have pretty good Italian pasta and things like that if you wanted it, you know. And then, of course, Ellis came in, and Ellis had, really put our Italian food. The other restaurant, I think, that made us real popular was Jim Reed's.
Yes, their
Yeah.
food was excellent.
And she had a lot of good Italian dishes. And of course, Tina Loria she owned the Greenbrier Motel up there, but she had the little restaurant in there. And she was a wonderful Italian cook.
I like Giulio's too.
Oh, Giulio's is one of my
To be a treat, I would go to like Giulio's.
Exactly.
Growing up, Rosalind, when I was growing up, I was born in '60. I didn't want a birthday cake. I want Smitty's pizza.
Is
That's what I had for my birthday.
Well, for some reason, I never got hung up on pizza.
I could eat pizza day and night. I love pizza.
My children could too, But that isn't my favorite Italian dish, And a lot of times the kids will say, we're coming over and bringing pizza. And I say, okay. Or one of our favorite places to go, if we're having a little family get together, somebody's birthday or something, we go to Twin Oaks.
Twin Oaks.
Well, of course, then my son Michael will say, bring out 10 pizzas and everybody get a salad. Well, I will eat a piece of pizza. But pizza is not my favorite. My favorite Italian food is pasta.
Yes, mine too. I love it.
Any kind of pasta.
Oliveria's too. We don't want to leave out Oliveria's.
No. I love Oliveria's restaurant.
Delicious.
And they have Sonny Oliveria was like my brother. He was another. As I tell you about these clannish people. We lived here, and Sonny lived next door. And his mother had 2 boys, and my mother had 2 girls. And so we were just like, if Ann wanted a daughter, one of us went. If Mommy wanted a son, Jimmy or Sonny came. So we were so close. We were like family. He was getting ready to pass. He called me and he said, would you and your husband go on a cruise? He said, I want to take Shirley on one cruise before I go, one more cruise. And my husband and I cruised every week if we could get a ship. And I said, sure, we'll go with you. So we went with them, and he got sick, and we had to air flight him back about 6 days into the cruise. But it was wonderful for me and him. I mean,
Where did they start off at?
Oliveria's?
Yeah, where was their first restaurant?
Their first is right where they are.
Oh, okay.
There was a little stand that sold like hot dogs. It was like a little wooden stand that you see at football games or something, And they started there, and then they added a little bit on this side and changed their menu a little bit on that side. And Sonny and Shirley loved to go to Italy. And so they would go to Italy. And, then they bought Green Acres, and they called it Via Veneto. And that Via Veneto means a street. Veneto Street, that's the name. Via means street. And so Sonny said, I want to name Green Acres an Italian name, Rosalyn. We was sitting there. He looked at me and said, there it is, Via Veneto. It was a street sign, yeah. And that's what they named it, They named it Via Veneto. And him and Shirley went back to Italy many times. They loved Italy. But they started, and of course, now all their children are in the business. Every one of their children are in the food business. Of course, their one daughter has Almost Heaven bakery, and the other daughter runs the Morgantown store, and 3 grandsons run Green Acre or Via Veneto, and they've changed the name. I forget what they call it now. And the others are still in the store there.
That's good that they're carrying on that.
Oh,
that
absolutely,
tradition.
absolutely.
Well, let's talk food since
Food?
we're on that subject anyway.
Okay, let's talk food. Okay.
Your cookbook came out. When did that come out? 2000?
2000, I think I had when I retired. Then I spent time promoting it.
How did that cookbook come about? What made you want to do a cookbook?
Well, for some reason, when I went to Italy, and I was there the first time I went. I was there over 2 weeks, and I stayed in San Giovanni where my dad was born. And I got to know the people, and every night somebody came and they would say, "We Katrina," which meant we were cousins. Well, I don't know if they were cousins or not. "You come to my house and eat." So I would go there and study what they did. And I got to see how near what we had here was to what they had still was fixing in San Giovanni. There were some changes. And I mean, I try to study things. I don't want to say something and it be really wrong, although I do say a lot of wrong things. But, and when they came to America, the Italian people, they brought their food, their food recipes with them. But there were things here that they couldn't get, so they had to supplement what they couldn't get with something else, And so I studied all that, and I saw where they made the changes and what they did, and I felt I was one of the last generations that had been subjected to the old-fashioned real recipes, Italian people most of them were poor. They worked their way up. When they come over here, most of them had $1.30 in their pocket, and that was it, And so they learn just simple, basic recipes,
And that would feed a large family.
That's exactly
on very
right.
limited budget.
Exactly right. And I used to say, listen, this is my favorite story about food. Growing up, we were poor, but we didn't know it. My dad furnished for us. My brother went to college. My sister went to college. But it was a sacrifice. And Dad worked 2 and 3 jobs and worked hard, And I mean, we didn't realize, we didn't know. I mean, we never were on food stamps. We never had this or, went out for that or the other.
Really, everyone was poor, though, Rosalyn,
Well, I think, but we didn't know it.
Yeah, no one knew it.
We thought that was
I've heard my dad say that.
Yeah, that was a way of life, But I used to say my mother would cook for always had a meal on the table every evening, and Dad would come in at 3:00, and I would come in about 4:30 from when I went full time at cable company, and Mother always had a meal on the table. We always said, and Menescia. Do you know what Menescia is?
No.
Menescia is very, very popular Italian. It's potatoes and greens, and you can add, you season it with some kind of pork seasoning, bacon or pork fat or whatever you want to do, and then you add maybe like a kidney bean or a brown bean in that, and it's almost like a soup, but you don't cook it till it's a soup, and you use the kind of, my favorite greens is Swiss chard. Mm-hmm. So when I make Menescia, I use Swiss chard potatoes, and a lot of times I like to have Italian sausage as a meat with my Menescia. But back then we couldn't afford meat, so we didn't have any meat with our Menescia. And so Mommy would she'd cook a big pot and we'd eat it tonight and then something else tomorrow and the Menescia the next night. And I used to say, and my brother can remember me. He was Mother had the kids. I was 16 years old when my sister was born, and then my brother was born 3 years later. But anyway, my brother said, "I can remember you saying, oh, when I get married and I'm rich, I'm never going to eat Menescia." And he said, "I can remember you saying that all the time." So he always comes in. His wife's birthday is a week after mine in October. So he always, if he can't come and take me, she comes up from Florida and we go to Julio's. That's our birthday present from him, dinner at Julio's. So we had gone this day to Julio's, and he called and he sang happy birthday to us. And he said, "Tell me what you ate." I laughed. I said, "Billy, I had Menescia and Danny had pasta visual." He said, "Oh my gosh, I just heard Mom turn over in her grave." I said, "Now, isn't that awful?" To me, that was Menescia was a food that I just really hated it when I was little, but now I love it.
Yeah.
I would almost cook it every day at my home for me.
And
every
it's
day.
Kind of better like the second time.
Exactly.
That's like me growing up. Dad had to have potatoes every evening at supper. We had potatoes every day, and I got so sick of potatoes. Mm-hmm. But what I wouldn't give now to have some of my dad's fried potatoes.
Well, Italians, it was the pasta. You had to have, you didn't have to have, that was the way that they stretched their food budget, was using pasta. I mean, you can feed 15 people on a pound of spaghetti if you want to stretch it, you know. And so that was, and you got in the mood. That's what every Sunday. Well, we did one Sunday. My mother had meatballs and pasta. The next Sunday, she had chicken pastina. Do you know what that
I
is?
love that. Yes.
Oh, I do too.
I love it.
I got some in my refrigerator. I cooked the day before yesterday.
You know, the Italian mothers spent most of their time in that kitchen,
That's
didn't they?
right. That's exactly right.
Morning until night.
You're right. Exactly. We laughed. In my cookbook, you'll find a recipe for what is called a crazy cake. That's what, call it. And how many people said, why would you call that a crazy? I said, I have no idea. And I asked my older sister, I said, Joanne, why'd Mommy call that a crazy cake? She said, I don't know. And we were sitting there. I said, Joanne, if we wanted to treat, a lot of times we'd be sitting out in the backyard on a blanket. And I said, we want a treat, Mom. And she'd run in and mix this chocolate cake up, stick. Like at 45 minutes, we had hot chocolate cake. But the cake always cracked. And I said, maybe that's why she called it crazy, because it had a crack in it.
And they wouldn't write these recipes down most of the time.
No. I have something at home. My daughter helped we gave the home place to my baby sister, and my daughter was helping my baby sister go through my mother's things when she was moving in, and they found a handwritten recipe of Easter bread. And my daughter owns About You over in Bridgeport, and she found a place that superimposed my mother's recipe handwritten on a board, cutlery board, whatever you call it. Yeah, I love it. It's right in my kitchen. Right, I see it every day, and I knew it immediately. She gave it to me. She had one made for me, my two sisters, and my brother. And when she gave it to us, I saw Mommy's writing. I started crying. I didn't know what the recipe was, but I knew it was my mother's writing.
Oh, that's special.
Yes.
And we were talking earlier how your mother could make something and I could do the same recipe and it's never the same as what she made.
I know.
I think they put the love into
something. And my granddaughter will tell me, she'll say, Grammy, I made this. And she said, but it doesn't taste like yours. And talking about food, when you think about Italian food, you think of garlic and the spices, garlic and oregano and basil and those spices, And I can't tolerate oregano. I don't like oregano. And I taught a couple cooking classes here in the area with the festival, and they would come in and I'd say, girls, I'm hung on basil. I love basil. Right now in my kitchen, I have a pot this big and a basil plant growing like that.
Oh, the fresh is the best.
And it'll last me almost till Christmas. I think I can stretch it till Christmas. I'll have fresh basil, But that's one of the spices, and that's what makes our food.
Yes.
I think that's what you learn to, and you have to learn. Now, my mother would probably break my fingers if she saw me putting that much basil in my tomato sauce, because I know she didn't. And another thing, you will find that most Italian people who cook, their mother's meatballs are the only ones, or their meatballs. I can't eat nobody else's meatball. I can't go nowhere and eat any. I have to have my own meatball, And I have a lot of friends who are that way. They'll say, it's good, but I said, I don't have to explain. I know what you mean. We have been, I don't know if we were raised up with that certain taste or what it was, but I can't go somewhere and eat anybody else's meatball. I just can't do it.
Let's talk about the seasons cooking throughout the different seasons. Okay. And I'm going to start with spring.
Okay.
Dandelion greens.
Oh.
How special are those to Italians?
I love dandelion greens. Oh my gosh. There's no green like a dandelion green, and I learned through some cookbooks I bought in Italy and from the people. I even learned to fry the dandelion flower. dust. It's almost like an oyster. You dust the flour with egg. I mean, just the flour with egg and flour, and fry it. Oh, it's delicious. It's absolutely. And another thing I made one time, and I think the recipe's in the book, dandelion wine, and it's supposed to be the best tonic in the spring.
I'm curious about that.
I made dandelion.
Was it potent?
It was a little potent, yeah, but it was take a little drink of it after dinner, like an aperitif after dinner. It was delicious. So, yes, the only thing is I hate to go out and pick dandelions. And then you got to make sure that where you're picking them, that no animal, dogs have been out there
or chemicals or anything.
Doing anything on them, yes. Yeah, dandelions are wonderful spring tonic.
Now, springtime also makes me think of Easter. So you mentioned Easter bread.
Yes, exactly. And
does Immaculate Conception still sell that?
Yes, they do.
Do they?
Yeah, they're yeah.
And I think everyone's recipe on that's a little bit different.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's different. The Easter, of course, when we were young and we didn't have money to buy hams, so probably at Easter we had lasagna. That was our Easter meal. Mother would make lasagna for dinner. But we always had colored eggs. And we did the real eggs, And our Easter, instead of having Easter baskets, my grandmother, my mother's mother, she would make the Easter bread. And she would make us doll babies. Have you ever seen Easter doll babies?
I have, and I've seen they're works of art, actually, aren't they? Mm-hmm. Like little bunny rabbits or ducks.
Yeah.
With these beautiful eggs in them.
Yeah, well, Grandma always made us the kids Easter, and it would be you'd roll it out big like this, and then you would kind of plait it, and on the top was the round circle, and you put the egg in it, and you drew a little face on the egg. And that was our Easter. We never had chocolates and.
Oh, I'd rather have that.
That's right. That was, and we'd laugh all week long. We'd start and we'd nibble from the bottom till one leg was gone and the other leg was gone until we had the whole Easter bread gone. But Easter bread is very important. I love Easter bread. I could eat it all. As a matter of fact, when I make it at Easter, I put it in the freezer and I eat it all. For as long as it lasts. I love it toasted with butter and a nice cup of coffee.
Too. Yeah, that's like delicacy.
Exactly.
Oh, that's great.
Exactly. Easter bread is a one. You wouldn't be Easter without Easter bread.
When do you make am I pronouncing pita piata?
Pita piata.
Is that made at Easter?
No, that's Christmas.
That's Christmas.
Christmas,
okay.
Yeah.
That's a whole art form in itself, too, to do that.
Exactly. We're getting ready right now. The PWA, we will make 100 pita piatas. We're going to do them on the Saturday after Thanksgiving. We've been doing them for many years. It's one of the fundraisers for us, and we get everything done. Pita piatas are costly,
What do they have in them for those that don't know?
First you make your filling, and in your filling, like just to say we're doing 10 pounds of flour, you would have 5 pounds of raisins, 5 pounds of nuts that are chopped. You would have 2 orange peel, just the peel. You would, grate it and just take the peeling off and mix that so that orange flavor marinates your nuts and your raisins. And then you would add cinnamon. You would add probably a cup of brown sugar. And you would mix that up. You don't want it to get too juicy because then it burns when you bake it in your dough. And you mix that, and you can let that marinate for a week if you want to. The more it marinates, the better it gets, And I love the little taste of orange in with that raisin and nuts.
Do they put a little bit of wine in that?
Well, the wine. My recipe is I put the wine in the bread, in the dough.
Oh, okay.
And so, say we're mixing 10 pounds of flour, and then we put 2 cups of oil, 2 cups of wine. And I love to use a dark wine. Like I love blackberry wine if I can get it. The dark, it makes the dough sweet and dark. I like for my dough to be. You put oil. I forgot where I lost my train. Oil and wine. 2 cups of wine, 2 cups of oil, and 2 cups of water. And you kind of warm that on the stove to get it to. And then you let your yeast. You crumble your yeast in the top of that. I use cake yeast. Crumble my yeast in the top of that and let it work its way in. And then when I mix my dough, in my dough is the 10 pound of flour, and we add, maybe 2 or 3 cups of sugar, and we put 2 or 3 cups of sugar and cinnamon in the dough. You let it raise about an hour. Mix it and let it raise about an hour. And then you have to roll it paper thin. You mix that wine and that water, that mixture. You have it sitting aside with the yeast. And then you mix, when you're mixing your dough, you mix that in the dough. You let the dough raise. And then you cut the dough and you roll it. Now, there's an art to rolling the dough. I mean, I've taught a lot of people down there. And if you don't get it rolled right, your recipe just doesn't. I mean,
and you don't want to work with it too much.
No, you don't. And you roll it. You roll it, and you turn what my recipe. And I tried to illustrate how to do it in the cookbook. Sometimes it's just hard to understand. But once you see it done, it's so simple.
It's beautiful.
Yeah. They're good gifts. A lot of people tell me, if you just give me a pinta piatti, that's all the gift I want. But
can we put your recipe on the podcast?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Okay. Absolutely. To put it on there because it's time. People are, but they take time and they're costly. They're costly to make.
But it's a special.
Yeah, and the last thing, which I insist on, the people I work with, those girls I work with, they get mad and say, here she comes. But I have to soak them in honey. I think the honey makes them. And the honey keeps the dough soft, and just when it may keep them a couple of days, and when it marinates with the raisins and the nuts and the orange, I think it's heaven.
You're making me hungry.
Yeah, I know. But that is the Italian. Of course, also at Christmas is the fishes, on Christmas Eve. And that came about, it used to be Christmas Eve was a holy day, and we could not eat meat on Christmas Eve. So that's why we had the big celebration on Christmas Eve with all the fishes. And I think they say, well, you have 7 fishes. And why 7? Well, that relates, 7 is a very popular number in the Bible. It was 7 this and 7 that, So that may come from there. I don't know. I've never heard exactly where the 7 comes from.
You growing up, what would you have on Christmas Eve?
Christmas Eve, we would have, my mother always fixed oysters. My mother fixed calamari. She would fry it, and then she would fix some in tomato sauce. Mother always had baked bacalao. She would bake bacalao, and then she would make bacalao in tomato sauce and cook noodles, and we would eat that almost like soup. We'd get the noodles in a bowl and pour the sauce and fish on top of that. And Mother never allowed us to have shrimp. She said, that's modern time. We don't want that. That's not old time, But she had, some of the bacalao she put in the tomato sauce, and some of it she fixed it with the stuffing, So she always had 7 different dishes, but some of it was the same fish, like the calamari fried.
Did you do the sardines? Did you have the sardines?
Sardines, yeah, the sardines. That was
those are good too.
Yeah, it was my dad's favorite. Yeah, there was a store in Northview, Lopez's Italian store, and they carried all that stuff. And Mr. Lopez always knew just what Mother wanted for Christmas Eve, and she went over there and got that. Now, I can remember as a young girl, very young, I had to go help. We ate Christmas. Here was this thing again. My grandmother lived in Northview, my mother's mother, and so we always ate Christmas Eve at my grandmother's. She fixed. Well, as she got older, she needed help, and I must have been 10 years old, 8 or 9, something like that, and I always had to go help my grandmother cook the fish, and my grandmother cooked eel. I know.
They look like a black snake to me.
To this day, if I see an eel in a store, I want to run. I'm scared to death. And I always had to hold the eel while Grandma pulled the skin off. So we've never had eel at our celebrations, believe me.
I can understand that. Although I have heard people say it's very good. I can't eat it.
I can't remember because I was scared to death of it when Grandma made me hold it, and then I never developed a taste.
It just looks like a black snake to me.
It's horrible.
How about the octopus? Is that calamari?
That's calamari,
okay.
yeah.
How do you fix that?
Well, Usually I take it and I cut it and I clean it. And if you cut it right, you cut it in rings. And, and I cut the no, they're not tentacles. I cut the tentacles off. I don't use them for anything. And I cut it in rings. It's about the size of your hand here, but it's round. And I cut it in rings and drop it in my tomato sauce. Now you can't cook it too long. If you cook that too long, it gets like rubber. 8 or 10 minutes in the boiling tomato sauce, they're done. And then I like to put it in egg and flour and fry them.
Oh, okay.
You can get those at Oliverio's. They make the best calamari in town over at Oliverio's.
And a big thing, like I remember in those older newspapers, turn of the century, were oysters. I mean, they would bring them in by the barrelfuls.
That's right.
And maybe that was the best way to do that back then.
Well, they were fresh.
They were fresh probably that way.
They went to the Potomac or over there by Baltimore and bought them fresh. Mother always just fried hers.
I love a fried oyster.
That's the way Mother did, and we would laugh. Mommy would fry breadcrumbs, and they'd end up being that big. And when I married Fred, of course, he wasn't Italian, he'd say, I can't find the oyster. I said, just keep eating this in there. But Christmas Eve was a big time. We probably lived all year for Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. And, of course, Christmas Day was just, it was just a traditional meal that, probably always had.
Because you went all out for Christmas
Eve. That's right.
Your mother was probably wore out by that time.
Worn out, but no, that was her time. I can remember Mother and Dad. My dad loved Christmas. My dad loved family. He loved for us all to be together, and they just lived in a little house. And as I had 4 kids, and my kids had kids, and my sister had 3, and her kids we grew to be a lot of people. Well, what we used to sit in the kitchen table, we
spend all day.
We couldn't do that no more. And here, Mommy would get 2 8-foot tables and put them down the length of her living room. And when you got in there and got a seat, you couldn't get up. You had to stay there. If you wanted something, somebody whoever was the closest to it had to send it down to you. But that was Christmas for my mother and dad. That's us being
wonderful
there.
memories.
Yeah, Christmas Eve. That was Christmas Eve for Mom and Dad. But also at Christmas, are the cookies. And the cookies also is probably something we should mention. A lot of people don't know, but the cookies are a tradition even for weddings and for Christmas Eve, and they use them for a lot of things now, the Italian cookie trays, But it was, I can remember the 2 Saturdays before Christmas, my aunts would come, and but 2 of them lived in Morgantown, 1 lived in Ohio. They would all come to Mommy's house, and they had bushel baskets. We didn't have plastic containers, and they would make all these Italian cookies in one in this different kind. That we'd have 8 or 9.
Name some of those.
Well, they would have
some of them were like little S-shaped cookies.
That was the Trigillis. They call them Trigillis. And you fried those. You made dough and dropped them in, and then you put powdered sugar on them, and the nut roll. And then sometimes they would make like the pinta piatti, but roll it like a jelly roll and slice it. And that would be a little cookie. And then they had the wedding cookies, which was almost like a sugar cookie, but it was puffy and soft. And they would put all different colors of icing on top of them,
How did they have enough time to do all of that, plus everything else they had to do?
Well, they would, like I said, they
Isn't
would
that
do the
something?
cookies all day on 2 Saturdays, and the same thing with a wedding. I can remember when my sister Joanne got married, here all the aunts came with their baskets, and this was her specialty, and they all put the cookies together in the baskets, and the day before the wedding, they went up and fixed the trays, and there was all the cookie table was ready when my sister got married. That's what they did. Tradition.
Beautiful, just beautiful.
Absolutely. And another thing which means a lot, and you'll find almost at every wedding, baptism, or things like that, are the almonds, and that are the candy almonds, so they're pastel colored. They're supposed to mean good luck.
Oh,
And
okay.
you'll find a lot of what we did back then. Now I don't know what they do. But we would get 3 almonds and put them in a little piece of net and tie a bow on them, and have a little piece of paper that would say Betty and John or whoever was getting married. But the almonds are an important part of our traditions that we use too.
Another thing I remember, I was friends with the Valonga family from Anmore. The figs, like the little,
Oh yeah,
you
the
know,
figs.
figs
Yeah,
were a big deal at Christmas
absolutely.
time.
I love figs.
Oh, they were delicious.
I ate my way through Italy with figs.
Love them.
Yeah,
And
and
she'd make little fig cookies. And
yeah, yes,
oh,
I
so
like the
good.
fresh fig. And in Italy, uh, like in the evening they'll have cheese, and they'll have like I learned to love amaretto. They got me hooked on amaretto when I was in Italy, and we would after dinner we would have amaretto over ice. It's so good, got that almond taste to it. And then they do a lot of limoncello. It's an after dinner drink too. Now it's pretty strong, but a lot of people, that's just what they do. I mean, you think they drink the wine during the meal.
Did your dad make wine?
No, my
No.
dad never made wine. I made wine. I tried my hand at it a couple times and did pretty good. But as I got older, I just you got to have a place to let it sit, and all that. So it's not easy to do.
Let's jump to summertime. I think everyone back then, if you had a little bit of ground, you had a garden, and you'd have your tomatoes and your peppers and all of that. What's some of your memories of summertime?
Well, of course, the garden was very important. I think a lot of Italian people would have starved if they didn't have a garden. And I can remember my dad would plant hundreds of tomato plants and hundreds of pepper plants.
Did he have a certain type that he planted that he liked the best?
Well, of course, he planted the thin skin. They called them thin skin peppers because when you canned them, if you had the thick skin, the water came out of them and spoiled. So he would have the thin skin peppers, and he had what he called the big boy tomatoes. I don't know, because Mother cooked everything; she canned everything. But my sister and I, and right now on my deck is the instrument that my dad used to make the hole, that you made a hole and dropped the plant down in it. No, it's an Italian name. I don't know how you say it. I forget. But
and they took pride in growing their tomatoes and their peppers.
I want to tell you,
garlic.
My dad grew zucchini, and we would laugh. My sister, the biggest thrill in the world my dad had was bringing me and my sister Joanne the first zucchini to make a tiella. Now, see, that's a tiella. Do you know what tiella is?
I know, but tell us what it is.
Well, that tiella is the dish where you use zucchini, peppers, potatoes
to make
layered. That's right, and you bake it. And Daddy would bring his first zucchini to me, and that was like something that he had accomplished. That was accomplishment. And Mother would say, Dad got the first zucchini, but he won't wait till he has to wait till he has the other one for you, for both of you. He won't give one without the other, But here he would come in his little car with the zucchini for us. And he loved to share. That was another thing. People shared their gardens. And we had a hothouse. My little grandmother, that was her little project in the summer. And my dad built her a glass hothouse, and she raised plants, and she sold them for 25 cents a dozen. And I can remember people coming and say, I want 2 dozen pepper plants, and she'd get in there and wrap them up in newspaper and a little bit of soil and water on them, and she'd get a quarter or how much, and they'd go with them. But yeah, gardens were so important.
And then canning came.
Canning.
Did you help with the canning?
Well, yes. This story maybe shouldn't be on there, but I'm going to put it on there anyway. My mother wouldn't let us help if we were having our period. She said that makes them spoil. You can't do it. So every time Mommy was canning, me and my sister had a period, whether we did or not.
So you'd get out of it.
But no, Mommy taught us to can, and my mother canned hundreds of jars of peppers and tomatoes. That was the biggest thing she canned, was the peppers and tomatoes. And
Did you have 2 kitchens?
you downstairs, oh sure, every Italian had their basement kitchen. Now, come on. You never used upstairs only when company was there. But yeah, we canned in the basement all the time. And, of course, Daddy would pick the peppers, and they would spread them out on newspapers because they wanted them to dry. They wanted to make sure they got rid of because that also the moisture in the pepper has a little bitter taste. And so, Mommy would have the newspaper and the peppers, and then we would have to get a paper towel, or I don't think we had rags. We didn't have paper towels. We had rags, and we had to wipe each pepper. And as we wiped it and put it, Mother cut it the size she wanted. And then Mommy had big kettles like this, and she would boil the tomato. Before this process back then wasn't open in a can. Daddy would bring 2 bushel tomatoes in. She canned the tomatoes and made the sauce out of the tomatoes. Then that sauce is what was used for the peppers. You couldn't can the peppers till you had cooked the tomatoes.
That was an all-day job.
More than all day, days.
Into the night,
That's
too.
right, days. And so Mom would have the big kettle and the sauce would be boiling. And Mother always put fresh basil. She always had fresh basil and fresh parsley. And parsley, you say basil in Italian, basilico, and you say parsley. I can't think of it in Italian. It'll come to me. But anyway, she would cut that up and drop it down in her sauce and let it cook. Then she would drop the peppers down in, and then get them out, fill them in the jars, tighten the lids, put them in the oven, make sure they seal. It was a big job, but
Yeah.
how
did they do all of that?
I don't know. I don't know.
Sometimes they do the peppers in the oil too.
Yeah, I
really
do
good.
that. I did that this year. I'm on the board for the farmers market in Clarksburg, and so I go up there every Saturday, and I love those fresh tomatoes. I eat tomatoes almost every day through the summer because I would get fresh tomatoes up there.
This was a good year for tomatoes up until we got the drought.
Exactly.
There's nothing better than a tomato out of your garden.
Oh, now my favorite thing is, and this could be my dinner, I make a tomato salad with fresh basil and onions and olive oil. And of course, then I have to eat a loaf of Italian bread.
Oh, of course. You have to have that. And then, too, like zucchini. Oh, you can do so much with zucchini.
Exactly.
Zucchini breads and all of that.
I tried this, and I've put it in my articles, and I hope that people do it. There's so many of them at one time you can't use them on. It makes me sick to see them go to waste. I can only eat so much together, But I said, if you take your zucchini and you grate it, squeeze the water out of it, put it in a thing. Now, if your recipe for zucchini bread calls for a cup of zucchini, you put it in a cup, then dump it out in a bag and put it in the freezer.
Yeah.
Then when you get ready to make your zucchini bread, it's grated, it's ready to use,
And boy, in January, doesn't that taste good?
Sound good. That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
Now, we're going to jump to the fall, and this is probably my favorite subject here. Mushroom hunting.
Uh-oh.
I learned how. I was blessed to know the Cosimo Vallelonga family that lived in Anmore. Then they moved across from Bell Meadows. They're on Route 20. And Mike Vallelonga taught me to mushroom hunt. And we hunted rooster. Well, we called them rooster comb. Hen of the woods is the other name of them.
Yes.
We hunted on the same trees that his father hunted on 60 years before. We were still getting mushrooms off of those oak trees. And I'm telling you, that's a part of my life I will never forget, was going mushroom hunting. Too old to do it now. My knees won't hold up.
Yeah. Well,
but we would sneak into places, Rosalyn. We had our spots, and we would go like miles out of the way so no one would see us going into these trees.
I know. You're exactly right. My mother and her friend, Mildred Oliverio, lived right there close again. They were good friends, very good friends. And Mildred could drive. Mother didn't ever drive. Well, Mildred and Mommy would get in that car days, and they would be gone all day long. And they'd drive 2 or 4 or 5 miles out of the way. They knew where, and Mommy had the binoculars, and she was driving in the car. She was looking out looking for them. And they had mushrooms. I saw them one time. They had enough to cover this floor here. And then they would clean them. That was the process of cleaning them, you know.
It's a job.
Yeah, I know. Now I learned how the two ways that I put mushrooms. I call them saliata, fungi saliati. Fungi is mushroom in Italian. Fungi saliati, and I put them in a crock. I clean them, parboil them, then put them down in a crock. And in my crock, I have salt, and I have a layer of Hungarian sweet wax peppers and garlic and mint. I put mint with them. Then I layer them up with the salt, however many mushrooms I have, put them in a crock, put the weight on top of them, and they have to sit at least 6 weeks before they're good.
Kind of like a sauerkraut in a way.
It's done the same way. You're right. It's done the same way, but it's mushrooms. But my kids love them in the
they're delicious.
In the crock, I know. And the other way I do them, of course, is I fry my peppers and put them in the peppers and the tomato sauce and can them like that, and then open them up, and you eat peppers and mushrooms like that.
You can make a meal just out of it. But now we hunted different ones. We hunted hen of the woods, rooster comb is what we called them. Chicken of the woods is what we called. I think the Italian word was nosci. Maybe that's how they pronounced it. It was sort of a fluorescent orangey, yellowish looking mushroom. Tasted like lobster.
I don't hunt them.
And morels, I did that. But they're as much fun to hunt as they are to make and eat. But you have to know the right ones. Don't just go out and pick anything.
No, and even now, yesterday, I tasted my mushroom before I let my kids taste them, because if I die, I don't want them to. You know, you never know. I trust. I have never found a mushroom, and I've been cooking mushrooms for 60 years, and I have never myself found one. Now I have this good friend. He finds them. He's on a train. He's a conductor on a train, and he goes by and he'll see him, and he'll get his car and come back and get him and bring him to him. His wife's not crazy about fixing them. She might. Last year he brought me. I don't know how much they weigh, but he brought me this pounds of them, and I canned a lot last year, and I shared them. Now this year I didn't think I was going to get any, and he brought me one larger one. And then this time it was just a small one. I had 4 pints of peppers and mushrooms that I canned in sauce, and
Oh, they're fun. I mean, I'm not kidding you. The biggest one I found was 15.5 pounds. Mike found one, I think, that was around 50 pounds. It looked like a big giant sheep.
Well, a friend of my son's. My son owned a Helston Recycling, and this guy came over, and he came over one time, and Marty said, "Hey, Stub, your trunk's not." And he said, "I know, I got something for your mother." His trunk wasn't closed. He said, "I can't get it down." Marty said, "What you got in your trunk?" I mean, for my mother. He opened it up, and they weighed, it was 82 pounds.
Wow.
It took me weeks, I think, to clean that thing. They had to cut it to get it in the trunk of the car. It was beautiful.
Yeah, you could go one day and it maybe be about the size of a tomato, and you could go back 2 days later and it would be larger than a watermelon.
And then you had to know when to get it too.
Yes.
I have and I write about it in my thing. And I've had a couple men say, "Don't write and say you got your mushroom." And I said, "Why?" I said, "Well, then people calls and they want it." I said, "Well, I've had people really get mad at me because And I called everybody I knew that had gotten mushrooms this year, before, and I called them this year, and they said, "No, we haven't gotten any, Rosa."
The weather just has to be perfect.
That's exactly right. And you have to get them at the perfect time. If they're beautiful and you think you're going to let it, and it rains and they get waterlogged, you might as well throw them away.
Yeah, you have to throw them away.
Yeah.
I'll tell you this story real quick. We broke down. Mike's car broke down about 2 miles from my parents' house, so we had to walk down to the farm. And we're walking along the road, and Mike says, "Hey, there's an oak tree up there. Go check and see if there's anything on it." So I climbed the bank. Oh, there was a big mushroom there. We didn't have a knife with us. We didn't have a bag. It wasn't a half an hour. We came back to that tree, and somebody had cut that mushroom. They saw me going up there and checking that oak tree.
And they came back.
I
know. People fight over them.
Oh, they fight over it. Yeah.
And I would laugh. It was Mildred's daughters and I. We're still very, very good friends. And Teresa Westfall. Do you know Teresa?
No.
She went to RW, and Carol, Teresa and Carol Teresa Westfall, they were Oliverios. Teresa Oliverio and Carol Oliverio. But anyway, we'd laugh. Our mothers, they wouldn't tell you. We tried when we know they were sick. My mother got Alzheimer's and she didn't know her name, so she couldn't tell us where. But we tried to get Mildred. Mildred, tell us where they are. No, she wouldn't tell. She died. She took it to her grave.
Yeah, it's like top secret. But I'm telling you, I had the most fun hunting mushrooms and fixing them and eating them. Was even the best.
Yeah, exactly. My kids, one of the biggest treats they have on Christmas Eve is eating the mushrooms in the crock.
Yeah.
I won't let them have them till Christmas Eve. They might be ready before that, but I take them out of the crock. I wash them real good because they got a lot of salt on them. I wash them, drain them. Then I stick them in a nice big bowl, and I add olive oil and more fresh mint and more fresh garlic. Stir them up,
good,
and like a salad.
Yeah, one time, and then I'm going to not bore you with my mushroom stories, but one time I was back up on our hill. I come from a farm, so we had a lot of property, and you always look for the oak trees. You see a mushroom growing on an oak tree or an oak stump, you know that thing is dying.
It's safe.
But there was a big oak tree, and it had like an opening in it. So I looked in there, and I saw this big mushroom inside the oak tree. I went to go cut that thing off of there, and there was a black snake in it.
Oh.
And I've heard stories of you would bring home these mushrooms, and they were so big and dense, you wouldn't know there'd be black snakes
in them.
because it's warm.
I've heard that too. I never take them in my house. I mean, I had this little one like this, and my daughter came yesterday, and she said, "Well, Mom, put it in that sink." I said, "No, I don't know what's in it." I said, I cut it out, cleaned it out here.
Yeah, creepy crawlies can
That's
be
right.
in there.
That's right. And
that's why you clean them so well.
And I want to tell you, if I don't see a bug in them, I don't take them.
Absolutely.
They might be poisonous, so I don't take them.
I've heard that too, Rosalyn. They said as long as there was a bug in it, you knew it was good.
That's right.
Yeah. They're fun. They're addictive.
I go by that.
Well, are we missing anything else to talk about Italian food?
I don't know about food. There's just one other little thing that growing up in Clarksburg for Italian people wasn't easy. There was a lot of discrimination back then. But we didn't handle it like people handle discrimination now. We just trudged along. I mean, I don't know whether you know that up at WI, Italian people weren't allowed to go up the front steps into the school. That was about my time when I was in school in the 40s and 50s. And Italian girls weren't allowed to be majorettes at WI in the band. And there are a lot of deeds recorded that say certain properties that Italians aren't allowed to live in Gulf Pius, or Italians aren't allowed to live down at Lake Floyd or over at Maple Lake. You're not allowed to buy property, you know. So we just worked our way. We proved that we were good, outstanding citizens, you know. My dad's favorite saying to me and my sister was, "I just want you to know one thing and keep this in your mind. You're not better than anybody, but there's nobody better than you."
That's right.
So Daddy always told us that. And we struggled along, and I can remember people making comments about Italians and using Dago or Blackie or some name like that. And I could hear it, and it kind of hurt my feelings. But I just let it go. You know, I just considered the source and let it go. I didn't cause a war or do any of that stuff. But I just know that as we got older and got a place in our community, and people knew we were good, upright citizens, and we were contributing to the success of the area, that things changed, you know. And I like to there's still some discrimination for all people.
Right.
You know, I mean, you know, but we handle it pretty good. We don't have demonstrations and places we're afraid to walk down the street and all that. But the Italian people persevered, and and we worked hard. And I think that we were proud of art, and we kept that. That's why we did the Italian festival. We wanted,
And mention that too a
well,
little
the
bit.
Italian festival. The main thing was we wanted to preserve and present our heritage. We wanted people who didn't know or couldn't understand why Italians did this, that, or the other. We wanted them to understand that, and we wanted to preserve our heritage for our young children, for the young people coming up. And I think we've done that.
I think you have too.
I think
were you involved in starting that Italian festival?
Yes, I was involved in 1979. Well, we really started putting it together in 78. The first festival was in 79, yes. And I was on the board of directors. And then I think it was 1981 or 82, they offered me the director, when I come to work for them as the director. And I did. And I did that until 2000 when I retired.
I was working here in town when that first started, and in the golf building.
Oh.
I had a ringside seat right above
down,
the plaza. But what I got out of it, because I'm not of Italian descent, the beauty of the Italian heritage and the people, and it was like a big homecoming, and I felt like I was a part of that too, even though I wasn't Italian.
That's what we wanted.
Yes.
There were those people who thought, I'm young, and people know me, and my children know. They'll say, don't tell an Italian joke in front of my mother. I mean, I don't go around telling Polish jokes or this kind of joke. And they'll look at my sons and they'll say, she'll get awful upset. Now, there are some people who can tell a little Italian joke, and I laugh at them because I know it's just funny. That's what you're doing. But there are some people who are trying to be smart alecks, and I don't take it. And I would, if I was in a room of 500 people and somebody said Dago, I'd get up and tell them.
Exactly.
I would get up and tell them. I don't tolerate that kind of stuff.
No.
I don't want to do it. I wouldn't embarrass a Black person. I wouldn't do that. And I don't want it done to me or mine.
I think that's what's so wonderful about these celebrations. The African American celebration, you get to know a little bit about that culture.
Exactly.
Yeah. Even like my bringing up is Slovak, and at one time they were discriminated against.
Their names are in those deeds. They
Yes.
couldn't buy property the same as Italians couldn't.
So I think as the generations go on, that's part of our mission maybe in life, is to bring that awareness to other people.
Exactly.
And boy, the Italian festival's still going strong today, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It's coming back. It had kind of lost some of its identity, but it's coming back, and I'm proud of it.
Yes.
And like you said, I take my chair up, and I've met people. I have met people the first festival who I still meet uptown and have a cup of coffee with.
It's like a big homecoming.
That's right. I have a lady in Charleston. She comes, and I look over there, and there she sits, and it's wonderful.
It's great.
Yeah, it's wonderful,
great.
and that's what it's about. That's what it's
and
about.
The food too there.
Oh yeah.
I used to open my window at the golf building just so I could smell the food. Well, Rosalyn, thank you so much for coming
it's
today.
been my pleasure.
I wish I had more time to talk. I love to hear the stories.
Well, and there's a lot of them, and sometimes we can focus more on that's one thing. If you think of something.
I would love for you to come back.
Yeah, anytime you want to just during the wedding season, if we want to focus on customs and things in weddings, during May.
I would love that. So you'll come back?
Oh,
That's a promise. Okay.
I promise. Okay. I will. Yes.
Well, thank you. And I close everyone with this little saying. Make each day count, because you are making history today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Silence of your wild wood, to the rhythm played by every mountain stream. It becomes a lullaby every time that I come home to West Virginia in my dreams. West Virginia mountain melodies, there's a new river singing to me. Oh, this time it's wild and free, your West Virginia mountain melodies. I feel secure in the arms of your green valley. There's a peace you've given me that yours alone Take me in like a child to the gentle of your wild West Virginia. I'm coming home. Your West Virginia mountain melodies. There's a new river singing to me. Oh, this time it's wild and free. Your West Virginia mountain melody. West Virginia mountain melody. There's a new river singing to me. Oh, this time it's wild and free. Your West Virginia mountain